Heather Hakes. Welcome to my channel. I'm excited to share with you my process of mindset and manifesting, and I'm offering you a free gift. If you want to learn how to manifest more money now, I've created a free video training that you can grab at my website, heatherhakes.com. Again, it's a free video training on manifesting money at heatherhakes.com. Welcome to today's interview. I've brought on Laura Mazzotta. Laura, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Please give the listeners a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
So I live in New York, about an hour north of the city, and I am an Akashic therapist, is what I call myself, because I've been a therapist for almost 20 years, but I've also recently transitioned over to Akashic healing and teaching.
And I'm new to Akashic. We've spoken about it a little bit, but I'd love for you to go ahead and just deep dive. What are the Akashic records and how can we use this in our own life?
So the Akashic records, I liken them to a spiritual library in the clouds. I'm a very visual person, so I like to envision this giant library up there that's manned by angels and guides and loved ones and ascended masters. And every single soul that has ever sparked into existence has a book in that library that has all the information about them. So when we open up your Akashic record, it has all the information about your soul from the time it first sparked into existence, all the way through past lives, current life, future lives. And I call it Google for the soul, because you have the opportunity to ask whatever question you want about what's going on in your life or in your past that can really help inform you. And not just have an understanding, but also heal, because this is the highest frequency space that you can be in. So what we're doing is we're actually raising our vibration by getting attuned to this space, and illness and dis-ease cannot exist at a high vibration. So it's very preventive just to be located there.
Well, and I'd love to touch on that a little bit for anyone newer to the space or understanding that any dis-ease in the body stems from thought and stress, and that even Napoleon Hill's book, I was listening to it on Audible again recently, he shared, and that was from the early 1900s, that any illness, it's not real. Like that's all man-made via our thoughts. And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Right, exactly.
Especially, okay, something about, and I don't really want to go too far into it, but COVID. So
Yeah.
I've just stood back from a space of going, what in the world? I don't understand this. I know I believe in a higher vibration and that our bodies are, but the media, do you think it is just the fear-based and the power of the media to have done what has happened?
Oh yeah, for sure. I actually have a very funny story about COVID. Can I tell you?
Yes.
So I had COVID in March, last March, of course. Well, it's not March yet. And my whole family had it. And I have an immunodeficiency. I actually get like plasma infusions every week for that. So I was feeling really, really good before I got COVID about this whole pandemic. I mean, not feeling good about it. Don't get me wrong. But I was like, I'm the queen of introversion. I love being home. I love being with my family. So like my whole family's home. I'm with everybody that I love. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this feels great. Like my husband's home. He's cooking during the day. I get to work. Like this is beautiful. And I just kept getting busier and busier in my business. And I was just feeling really high on life. Well, one morning I wake up and the first thing I read is that like almost 700 people died in Italy that day. It hadn't really come much to the US yet. We'd gotten a little bit. We were starting to understand a little bit about it. But I felt terrible. And I was just like crying and I felt really guilty most of the day. And I said, here I am loving my life and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is amazing because it's been so good for my relationships with my family, whatever. And I'm just not even considering like all these poor people who are losing their lives and their family members, and horribly guilty all day. Next morning I woke up, had COVID. I'm like, see, I let myself go there.
Right.
Totally let myself go there.
Okay.
I firmly believe that.
And question about the Akashic records and past lives, there is theory out there that death is not real. As Abraham Hicks says, we just croak. We go back into non-physical. And so what is your theory on death?
Well, I believe and have so much evidence of with working with my clients for years, just like Brian Weiss. I don't know if you guys have been familiar with him, but he's like the king of past life regressions. And he used to be a psychiatrist and wrote the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, and had never believed in any of this stuff, but his client just kept having these experiences over and over and over again. He's like, it's undeniable. And so for me, when your soul leaves this body, there's so many things it can do, right? It can just kind of like hang out in the ether and, you know, snuggle with the other souls. It can go back to like its point of origin, which could be a star. It could be another galaxy. It could be a different planet. Who knows? Or it could decide that it has more lessons to learn and come back for another round.
Is that a powerful message, though, that we choose to come and have this human experience?
Oh, yeah. Have you read the book, The Energy Codes by Dr. Sue Morter?
I have not.
That's a fantastic book just in general. But she talks about the bus stop and how as souls, we're all lined up at the bus stop and we get to decide which bus we get on. And when we decide to get on that bus, we're also making the decision to get on that bus with other souls who are meant to ride that bus together into this lifetime and all learn from one another. And every single soul that was on that bus, you have interacted with or will interact with before you die. And that could be a cat, and it could show up as a person or a bird, you know, but you have made soul contracts with each of these people to assist each other in learning your lessons. And sometimes the people that choose to get on the bus with you are the ones that have agreed to be the jerk in this life. Like, you know, they agree to be the jerk so that they can help you grow, because that's better for the greater good.
Let's go there. I love the term soul contract. And I love that. And I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to relationships, why do we get so stuck in victim mode, or, you know, he did this to me and she did this to me, rather than understanding we chose before coming here that we were going to have this interaction, have gratitude for the experience. And then, as I like this, I'm just going to say it, move the fuck on.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
But why do we get so trapped and triggered with relationships?
Because we are meant to experience duality on this planet. That's the whole point of us being here, right? So when we come in as infants into this planet, we come in without the conscious awareness of our spiritual selves. And the reason that happens is because we are meant to come to our own understanding so that we can learn the lessons that we need to move forward. And talk about like throwing us into the trenches. Well, we decided to come into the trenches, right? And say, yeah, I am willing to experience duality, which means, or polarity, however you want to look at it, which means the extreme negative, the extreme positive. So I get to experience all of that. And I also get to experience it through my 5 senses in a very tangible way that you can't as a soul. So it can be, there's a rub there, right? There's definitely a rub, because it can feel limiting to us to be stuck in human bodies, and that we have certain limitations, right? So it's set up this way with the polarity because it keeps offering us more and more opportunities to look deeper and deeper within, to really get back to that true soul nature that we are.
Which is infinite potential, right?
Correct.
Okay, so how can we shift a mindset and a perspective to realize that this is a gift? I chose to be here. I can make the best of it. How do I heal this past energy and this gunk so that I can have a much better tomorrow? What's the process?
So some people can just decide if they're ready, right? Like I've had people that have done Akashic sessions with me once, and it's changed the course of their entire life. And it doesn't mean that I'm the most magical human on the planet, because I'm not. And it's not even coming from me. It's coming from the records.
Yeah.
It's because they were ready. You know, they were like right at that juncture, and they were prepared to say, whatever comes through, I am willing to take and implement. And I always say, literally, if you listen to every single thing the Akashic records tell you to do, you are going to be golden. But most of us don't. I don't even listen all the time when they tell me stuff to do. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that today. You know, but if we do, then we're following that soul's path. So it's How do you get there? You stop and listen. You get to know yourself in stillness, which can be through meditation, through journaling, and to be curious, right? Rather than when things come your way and you judge it or you blame it or you get into this, what does that mean? And you're trying to get an understanding. Get really curious about, oh, interesting. Like now, if I get any physical symptoms that come up in my life, I'm like, oh, intriguing. What's that trying to tell me?
Okay,
and
so
try to get an understanding. Go ahead.
Question for you, something I've been trying to do lately, when I call it monkey mind. So when I catch myself tripping that I got triggered, and then I want to go through this whole situation in my head and try to justify and judge, and then I feel awful, right? Mm-hmm. When I catch myself doing that, I'm literally, it's almost like I have Tourette's. I'm like saying out loud, stop it. But is that the best approach? Because am I just repressing it?
So it depends. So I used to tell my clients to just envision that big stop sign for sure. But there's a couple things. One is, if this is a themed thing that's running through your mind, like themed obsessive thoughts, then there's obviously something that you need to learn about it, that you need to attend to. So you can journal about that. I highly recommend inner child work. So that would be something that you could tune into your inner child, because at that point, when you say, okay, stop, redirect, you're parenting yourself. And so anytime that we can give ourselves that parenting in a very compassionate and forgiving and patient way, we are assisting ourselves with moving through something like that.
Okay. And
go ahead.
Give an example of inner child work.
So think about it. Think about a child. A child they just want to play. They want to hang out. They just want to be silly. They're full of joy, and they're very animated, right? Think about all those qualities. And so what you want to do is connect to those qualities of yourself and view yourself in the same way, right? So being forgiving. So like if you're tantruming or you judge somebody or you act out, instead of being like, oh, shut up already, right? Yeah. You want to say like, oh, honey, okay, I know you're excited and I know you want to say this or that, but we can't interrupt people. And talking to yourself in a way that's very compassionate and loving is very helpful with inner child work. At the same time that you make sure you give yourself time to play, just cultivate the relationship with your inner child. Like get to know him or her and really understand what their needs are, because not all of us have gotten all of our needs met when we were human infants. And so it offers us the opportunity to understand that from ourselves so that we can offer ourselves those needs, or meet those needs, I should say.
The first coach I ever had, he told me, I remember through one of our sessions, and I had written it down, to be childlike. And that's something I think adulting, people have become so serious in life. And I'm like, I know. If you're not having fun along the way, what is the point?
Right. Well, and it's also wonder, like there's so much wonder and awe, and children can be so grounding, because it's like, you look at an 18-month-old and they're just looking up at the trees like, oh, look at all of them. And they love the sound. And it's just like, it's all wonderful. And being able to see things with wonder is so beautiful. It's great. We have that opportunity as human beings with our 5 senses.
Yeah. Okay. So then question for you, with the Akashic records and the work that you do, because I talk a lot about mindset and manifesting, because we all have desires. And so can we talk through when you're feeling stuck or you're having struggle? Obviously, how do you get from where you are to where you want to be? What is the work and what's the process?
So that's really about the most important thing, which can be the hardest for some people, is figuring out where you want to go, like figuring out what you want. And it's just so funny, because so many times, I can't tell you the number of times that I've talked to clients and said, okay, well, but what are you looking for? Like, what are you looking for? And they're like, I have no idea. I'm like, well, there's problem number 1, my friend. So it's like, what lights you up? What makes you feel passionate? You can think back to that inner child and like, what got you excited when you were younger and those things you did to play. What are those things that, like, if you really tune into, I always refer to the Sacral Chakra, which is like your womb space right underneath your belly button. That's your space of creativity, sexuality, sensuality, belonging. So getting yourself to be creative, like allowing yourself to get creative about daydreaming about whatever it is you want. And that doesn't mean that you're fixating on, well, I have to bring it in exactly in these steps or in this way, or else it's not going to work, right? Really what we're doing is we're manifesting the vibe that we want to embody. And what happens is people get distracted because they think that they're looking for like the hot guy on the white horse with a crown on his head, right?
What's wrong with that?
But
Yeah.
that's the only thing that you're holding in your vision. And then when the amazing feeling comes along, you don't even realize it because you're still fixated on the fact that you want that particular vision. So you want to get clear with what you want in terms of how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, all right, well, what's gotten in the way of me getting to this point already? And those are the things that you can dive in to heal. Because if we said, oh, we have to heal everything and get it out of our way to move forward, nobody ever would. And that's overwhelming and it's not necessary. And that's sitting in the mess.
Yeah.
You know, so it's better to identify what's getting in my way and how can I shift my perspective on it, heal it, clear it, change my belief system, shift the story and start writing a new story.
Okay. So you just touched on, I think those are really good points. So maybe let's run through an example. In relationships, dating, that's pretty generic and easy. So for those people that have gotten too hung up on height, eye color, hair color, nationality, whatever, you're saying what's really important is to know the what. So maybe the experiences, how you feel, laughing together, a partner, compassion, intimacy, support. Is that what you focus on? And that's what you would get excited about? And then let the physical manifestation show its face?
Exactly.
Okay. But for somebody who is hung up on a specific look or an attraction, how do you let that go?
So what I do is I do something called a dyad, where I basically dyad with them, but it's typically not them. It's typically their inner child, to be honest with you. But what you do is you allow that person or inner child to speak and have a voice, because clearly it's not going away because they feel like their voice is not being heard. This is what I want. They're having a tantrum and their ego is having a tantrum. So
wait, you're saying the inner child is?
The ego or the inner child, either one. Yep. Whichever one is talking to me when I'm doing the dyad.
Okay.
And so I will ask the same question over and over again. So, you know, if you said to me, but I want this guy with brown hair and blue eyes, and he's got to be 6'1". I'm like, okay, so what is so frustrating about the fact that you don't have that? And then you would answer the question. And then I say, thank you. What is so frustrating about the fact that you can't have that? And we do this for 5 minutes. And you can do this with yourself. You don't have to do it with a practitioner. And we set the timer for 5 minutes and you just let it keep coming out. And I'll tell you what's so cool is when you do this with yourself, you just write everything down. You have so much content of what's going on in your subconscious mind that it's very healing, because really what you're bringing forward, what's underneath that fixation.
So ultimately, it just wants to be heard.
Exactly.
And once it feels heard, I think that's what a lot of people are seeking, right? You just want to be heard.
Yes.
And then you can let it go. And then, so if a guy who's 5'10" and blonde who's bald shows up, can that attraction happen because now you've been heard?
Absolutely. 100%.
I'm talking to myself.
It's unreal how much it releases. I mean, every single time I do this, people are like, oh, I feel so free, so relieved. And it just doesn't come back. It really doesn't. And then, I mean, it might come back, say, at a different level, right? Like a different layer. But then you just do the dyad again, kick that to the curb and move on.
So I think here's another pain point that I feel a lot of people experience: money. And people are so hung up on money and talk about ancestral and conditioning and it's, you know, it's been decades and centuries of whatever. So how do you break the ties of that lack and scarcity? Because money is just energy. How do you do that with money?
So there's so much work on money. I mean, it's also a sacral energy, right? It's also like a very sensual, creative, passionate energy. And so the same work that you're going to do on sexuality in particular is going to be money work, because it's about safety, right? People worry, they don't think they're going to be safe. So ultimately, money work is about grounding. It's about trust that we're all in this together, that we are a collective universe, and that we're all exchanging with one another, and that we are infinitely provided for. But it's really, once again, why does the theme keep seeming to be the inner child today? But yes, it's coming back to the inner child, right? Yeah. Which is the inner child feeling safe and finding that safe foundation, and really knowing how secure you are, not only in your current environment, but within yourself, creating your own safe foundation within yourself. And one of the best ways that I like to do that is to help people start getting a structure in place for themselves, right? Because when we say, all right, I'm going to eat at this time, and then I'm going to go do this for myself, and you really think, what are those things that I want to do for me? And then start making them happen. And it doesn't have to be on a daily basis. It can be once a week, but you're showing yourself that you're reliable. You're showing yourself that you will consistently care for yourself. And that's the kind of messaging we want to start implementing to secure that level of safety, so that, you know, we don't have to rely on money to do it or to feel it.
So if safety is an underlying root cause or issue that we don't feel safe, how is that repelling money? Wait, okay, let me think of it in a different question. If I'm not feeling safe, that means I'm low vibe. I'm probably closed up, right? So my fists are closed. I'm afraid. And if we can heal that and let it go, we open up, and that's how you can
receive.
Okay. So
yeah, receive.
Feeling unsafe means we can't receive because we're closed up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I also love this too, because I just love like your body language is, you know, because I used to do lives on this all the time when I first started my healing business, of like that desperate clenching energy, that gripping energy is never going to get you anywhere about anything, because you're choking it to death. You think about a really tightly closed fist, you know, you're squeezing that to death. There's no air that can get through that closed fist. When you start to open it a little bit, at least some air can flow through. And then when it's really open, you can receive all of it. And so one of the things that I have people practice in as an action step is to start practicing receiving. And it can be as simple as somebody opening a door for you, somebody baking you banana bread, somebody offering to like drive you somewhere. And every time somebody offers, you say, yes, I would love to receive.
I think that is such a great visual and teaching point, that we have a chokehold on what we want in life. We want it so bad. Here's what I'm imagining. We want it so bad. We're white knuckling the steering wheel, trying to control every outcome and everything happening in our life. If we would just get an Uber driver and enjoy the ride, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Well, that's easier said than done. So how do we step into that?
Right, because the hard part too, right? This is where the leap of faith comes in. And oh my gosh, this is the stuff that would give me heart palpitations when I started this work. Because I had that one meme that I saved on my phone, and I wish I knew who it was by, but it just says leap and the net will appear. And I'm like, oh, that makes me so scared. I don't think I can do that. But especially when it comes to money, especially, that's the big thing. Invest before you have the money necessarily, or invest before you get exactly your outcome that you're looking for, right? Because when you do that, you're showing the universe that you trust and that you're following the path where you're led regardless. So if I were to pay for an Uber driver, I'd be like, okay, well, this is $12, but I only have 15. But I also know that as I give this person $12, how do you know that you're not going to get to the coffee shop and somebody in the line before you is going to buy you a coffee?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you then have actually exponentially expanded your likelihood to receive, because you're now open and you're trusting.
Isn't that the law of reciprocity?
Yeah.
And the whole thing, whatever, I remember I don't know where I heard this, but whatever you are seeking, give. because whatever
Exactly.
you give, you'll get back. And don't give to receive, but if you're
No,
seeking love give that to somebody.
that's so funny. I literally was just this morning, I did a session with a client, and it's somebody that I've known for a really long time. And she's like, I know that you aren't really seeing traditional therapy patients anymore, but my family's in a really bad space, and I was wondering if we could meet. So I said, sure. So we met. And then while we were meeting, I said, you know what? I'm refunding your money. And she's like, no, 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 no. I'm like, yes, it just feels right. Like, I adore you guys. I've been connected to you for years. I want to give to you. I just want to give to you. Like, I'm just called to give to you. And so I'm just going to do it, and that's when it comes from that space where like, it just feels right. And I don't know why it feels right. It just does. And so I'm just going to do it. And that's when we receive even more, because we're not doing it with an expectation of something in return. It's not an exchange relationships. Those are never healthy.
Yeah. Okay. So something we touched on previously before we started recording was Hoponopono.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit, and this whole, maybe, that's a process or a tool someone can use to do this inner child work or releasing these blocks?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because it's effective for everything. Even if your refrigerator is broken, you can recite Hoponopono over the refrigerator. So it's an ancient Hawaiian prayer that communities would take responsibility for any kind of conflict or tension or negativity that exists in the community. So even if a mom and a daughter were having an argument, they would pull them out and they would all stand around, the whole community would stand around these two and hold hands and recite this prayer over and over and over again until the energy dissipated. And then they would go about their day. And then somebody was walking up and down the hallways of a long-term inpatient psychiatric facility and was reciting this over and over again in front of the patient's rooms and through their charts. And the facility ended up having to close down because the patients were not at 100%, but they were functioning so well that they no longer needed that level of care. So the effects have been brilliant, and it's so simple. It's 4 statements. It's thank you, I love you, please forgive me, and I'm sorry. And how I do this practice is when I'm starting a new Ho'oponopono practice, I get out my journal and I put each of those 4 statements on the top of a new page. So they have their own page. I have 4 pages. And I write out exactly why I am thankful for that person or situation. I love you because, and then I fill out the whole thing. And then after I get an understanding of my responsibility in this and how this is unfolded for me, I then just recite it over and over again when this person comes into my mind or when this situation comes into my mind. And you don't have to do them in any particular order, but reciting them is an energetic release.
Okay. Can you say the 4 statements one more time?
Thank you. I love you. Please forgive me. And I'm sorry.
And when I've done this before, I think in a situation, let's say you get in a tiff with somebody, I think that I love you to them. But when I've done it, I guess, especially, let's say I get triggered or feeling judgy or whatever, it's going back to, is that somewhat inner child work? I love you. You're safe. I love you. We don't have to retaliate. We don't have to, I love you. Mm-hmm. Is that Ho'oponopono on yourself?
100%. Doing Ho'oponopono on yourself is brilliant. And especially with your inner child, for sure. Yeah. The other thing that I will just say, just because I think this is an important thing to note, we want to be very careful that we aren't just using these techniques when something negative is coming up in our lives, like when we're triggered. Mm-hmm. We want to use them preventively on a consistent basis because we deserve that love just because. And our brains start to get wired with, oh, when I act up and I'm super negative, then I get the attention I need. And so you're setting up this tantruming soothing cycle for yourself. So don't train yourself that way, because I'm not saying don't use it. It's still a good step and it's positive, but be preventive with it and you're going to see a greater level of stability.
Okay, that is huge. And I guess I wouldn't have even thought about that way, but you're right. And that's why even hypochondriacs, they got so used to getting attention when they were sick or hurt.
Exactly.
That's how they act out. Okay, so in this case, is what you're saying, it's about being proactive and not reactive.
Correct. Exactly.
So how can we, because I know for me, at least, this is a daily intentional practice.
Yes.
I call it building my mindset muscle. And I've just become so much more aware, and I still have my moments and my days, and I call it falling off the wagon, but it's how long is the lapse between falling off or going through this thing and getting back on?
Mhm.
So how do we continue being proactive and living our best life instead of constantly reacting to shit?
Yeah. Well, a part of that is about knowing where you're going. Like one of my favorite questions that I ask myself is, does this support the life that I'm trying to create?
Mm,
So that's a big one to just bring your mindset right back into line, right? Does this support the life I'm trying to create?
yeah.
So that's a very helpful statement. The other thing is to make sure that, so for me, before I only open my client calendar up 1 month at a time. So before I open up my client calendar, I schedule my coach, I schedule my mastermind, I schedule my massages. I get 2 of those per month. Yay. And I schedule in the time that I need
Yeah.
for me to spiritually be centered and enlivened. And then I opened up my client calendar. And so that is one way that you can make sure that your time is set aside for you to be preventive. And during that time, you can use any of these techniques that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
But it's being intentional with that space and time for yourself, creating space in your life before you feel a need for it.
I love that. And I think especially I see it more with moms, but self-care is not a priority. And for me, it's self-care is not selfish. It's
No.
necessary. And it's that whole,
Yeah.
you can't pour from an empty cup. So I love that, to intentionally schedule and block out the time to take care of you so you can show up for the rest.
Yeah. And just because, like, you don't have to justify it. And that's one of the reasons that I know that I got physically ill, is because I had to justify everything. I was like, well, now I can't go because of my illness. Well, screw that. I just don't want to go. Like, I just don't want to go. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's allowing yourself to develop your sacred no and just say, yeah, no, I don't want to do that, instead of having to have a reason for it.
I love that
So,
too. So what we're talking a lot about here is boundaries. And sometimes
yeah.
I felt that way. It's like, man, I really want to be more social. And then I get asked to do something. And then it's like, but I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
And so, the FOMO, fear of missing out. There's another one I've seen, JOMO, joy of missing out. And I've just gotten to the point in my life,
Yeah.
I would rather be at home by myself,
Yeah.
reading a book or watching a feel-good documentary or whatever, rather than be in the energy just to be out.
Always. Yep. Totally agree with you.
Okay, so if we were to wrap this up in summary, what do you want people to take away from this conversation?
I mean, I want you to know how much power you have. I want you to realize that every single thing that happens to you is for you. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be comfortable. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to know exactly why it's coming into your life. But it's being able to, no matter what you're going through, hold that confidence and that hope that it's temporary, that you're going to move through it, and that it's going to actually move you further on your path.
And that takes time, right? That takes
Yeah.
it's a different perspective. And I think it comes down to choice, choosing to
Correct.
another saying I love, and I actually rewrote it on my mirror this morning, is it's this or something better.
Yes.
Anytime I'm feeling in a funk, I remember even back in the day when I would interview for jobs, not getting a job could really put people in a hole because you don't feel worthy and not enough. And that's quite a trigger. But if you realize that you didn't get that interview, so you could go on the next one, which was a way better job,
Yep.
this or something better.
Exactly. And that also brings me to, like, that every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else. So, like, if I'm saying yes to somebody asking me to go somewhere, but I'm not fully aligned, I'm then saying no to myself.
Mm.
So that also helps with that too. That mindset of being able to know that you have a choice in every situation, and you get to weigh what serves me and helps me become that best version of myself.
Okay, I have a question for you, and I kind of already cheated and asked you, but if you could give just one message to people, this is your last day or your last moment and you're going out, what do you want people to know?
We're all in this together. We're all in this together. Like, you're never alone, ever. I promise you, at least one person, probably a lot more, that are just like you on this planet or are waiting for you. And so realize that you have a unique gift that collaborates really beautifully and uniquely and fits like a puzzle piece with somebody else's. So show your authentic self, put yourself out there, open your mouth, and you'll have a higher likelihood of finding them.
Yes, I love that. Okay, I don't really want to, but for time's sake, I do want to ask you a few rapid fire questions to wrap up the interview. The first one being, what is a quote or motto that you live?
Less is more.
What do you mean by that?
Less stimulation provides you with more space. Less talking and more observing provides you with more wisdom. Less go, 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 go provides you with more ease and joy.
Oh, I love that. What is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
How many books am I currently reading? That's a funny one. Okay. So which one would I recommend? I absolutely adore the Zuda manuscripts. It's Zouddha, I believe. It's a spiritual book, but it's phenomenal because he weaves this beautiful story into it. It's an absolute, there's a lot of lessons in it. There's a lot of wisdom, and it's an easy read, and I love it.
Do you read Robin Sharma at all?
I don't know. Any book names?
The 5 a.m. Club was one of his biggest.
Oh, yeah.
But The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Anyway, Robin Sharma, he actually writes, and I think I'm going to mess up the name, but not quite fictional, but he just has such deep wisdom in his writings. Darn it, I can't think of his genre. Anyway, that made me think of Robin Sharma. So that deep wisdom of storytelling.
Okay, cool. I'm going to look that up. And the book that I read the most recently that I love, that I think everybody should read, is Think Like a Monk by J Shetty.
Really?
Oh, it was phenomenal.
Okay.
Phenomenal. And you know what's so awesome about it too? It's like therapy in a book, but deeper than that. It's awesome because it's like, he tells you his story, and he's the perfect mix because he worked in corporate, but then lived in an ashram. So he's like got both of these, and he was juggling between the two and expectations and all of that. And so, but he has lessons and like exercises you can do in each chapter, and it's awesome.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Final question for you. What advice would you give your younger self?
Be patient. It's all unfolding.
Thank you. I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, today's conversation was amazing. I wish we could have definitely gone longer, but thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. It's been awesome to hang out today. Thank you.